Hi, my name's Taylor Reed. And this is my senior thesis project. For what I wanted to discuss for my senior thesis project was the current energy crisis that we find ourselves in. For a little background, we currently get most of our electricity from fossil fuel generation resources. Um, these being coal, natural gas, oil, and gas, and nuclear generation. Um, Over the last 20 years or so, there's been a increased consciousness of some of the harmful side effects that some of these generation techniques can have on humans and the environment alike. And with this increased consciousness, there has been a growing call and expanded use of renewable energy technologies. Um, with this, we've seen the growth of renewable energy, but it's still not quite as competitive as we'd like it to be for baseload use in our energy grid. So that's something that I really wanted to take a further look at from an interdisciplinary's perspective of exactly the parts of this energy crisis. I wanted to look at this problem, and it's a very complex, polarizing issue of our time, one of the most important that we'll be facing, because the foundation that we lay today is is gonna determine where we go in the future, where we get our energy from. And so that I really wanted to break this problem down from the perspectives of government and politics, economics, and science and technology. I felt that these three disciplines were the most relevant to this issue, because this is such a industry that is so regulated by the government and has so much depends on the shape of these these policies that the government's creating, that I thought that was one of the main disciplines that should be focused on during this study. And also science and technology, the development of these renewable energy technologies is the real reason why this could be a possibility. And then I also wanted to look at it from economics, because you have to see if these things are cost effective, if they are comparative in costs, so that we could begin to phase out these old technologies with these new technologies. And so that's really the three disciplines that I wanted to look at this problem from. And so to give you a little background to start, currently America gets the vast majority of our electricity production from fossil fuel generation. Most of that coming from coal. Excuse me. Coal is the biggest player in our electricity generation right now. We also have an estimated 250-year recoverable reserve amount of coal, which is the biggest reserves of any of the fossil fuel generation or fossil fuel resources, excuse me. So coal is something that we've used for the better part of this last century to fuel our industrial revolution. It's been very important and a very big player. And so most of these resources are trying to get up to coal's level, if you will. They're trying to become on that stage, to unseat coal, because coal is also the most harmful of all of the generation techniques that we have. Coal emits several forms of carbon emissions that are considered harmful to the environment. Also some sulfur dioxide emissions, which are harmful to the environment. And so this is kind of the main issue with coal. Currently, we've seen the government introduce regulations on coal power plants, saying that they now have to capture 40% of all carbon emissions that they produce. This is one of the many regulations that has been introduced to try and curb the amount of emissions released by these coal factories. One of the reasons why these coal has so much of these emissions is because over half of the coal-fired power plants that we use today were commissioned before 1967. So these are very old power plants. The efficiencies are like around the 33% area, whereas new coal plants are closer to the 45% efficiency rate. So what I want you to take away from that is how much the emissions there are and how efficient newer coal plants can be, and cleaner. There's also a cut down in emissions in newer coal plants. I also want to talk about nuclear energy a little bit. Nuclear energy is also another heavy player that we use to produce our energy currently. It sits around about the 40% efficiency rate. It is very efficient technology. It also does not have any harmful emissions, which is a bonus and something that you really wouldn't think is possible. One of the downfalls of nuclear energy, obviously, is the potential for disasters that we know as the Chernobyl disaster and more recently the Fukushima reactor disaster in Japan. Obviously, those are pretty big detractors from nuclear energy. The potential for mass murder, potentially, is obviously a big detractor. However, nuclear energy throughout the world is actually gaining potential. It's a growing technology, something that is going to continue to be used, and it's part of it. Nuclear energy is also has a waste byproduct, a nuclear waste byproduct that is very harmful. Must be stored away from everybody, to where it can't be contaminated, the water, the ground, bad stuff. So that's another detractor from nuclear energy. I also want to talk about renewable energies. Currently, renewable energies, and for this study, I really only wanted to focus on wind energy and hydroelectric power and a little bit of solar, although solar is still kind of behind even wind and hydroelectric. So what I really wanted to talk about is the cost of renewable energies and why they just aren't quite there yet. Currently, natural gas is the biggest inhibitor to renewable energies, and I guess we'll kind of get into natural gas before we go into these renewables. Natural gas has seen a major growth in the last 15 years due to expanded and improved recovery techniques like fracking, and also due to the efficiency and lack of harmful emissions that it gives off. It is one of the fossil fuels that most experts say will continue to grow. It won't be cut down in the future. And so that kind of hurts renewable energy, because as long as natural gas prices are low, people will be more willing to use a more efficient natural gas than they will a less efficient, less proven renewable energy. So natural gas currently, with these new combined cycle turbines that these natural gas systems use, their efficiency rate is about close to 45%, again, right up there with coal. It's becoming a growing technology, something that still isn't perfected, but that's good. There's innovation always, and it's always continuing to get better. These fracking techniques, these improved fracking techniques, have also expanded the estimated recoverable reserves up to 200 years to some estimates. So there's also a pretty vast amount of resource there still to be tapped. And it's cheap. Like I said, it's cheap. Currently, you can purchase a utility company can purchase power from a natural gas generation plant for right around 1 cent per kilowatt hour. And we'll talk a little bit about the comparative price of renewable energy to that coming up. So that's really the main thing that I wanted you to get out of the natural gas part of this discussion, is how cheap it is, in that it's the biggest inhibitor to renewable energy. So to go into renewable energy from there, renewable energy, mainly wind and hydroelectric, are the two big players in this. There's all kinds of other technologies that are being created and thought of and tested that just aren't there yet. But the major two are hydroelectric and wind, and then solar is also in there, but it's a much smaller role as well. So for these technologies, they're known to be a little less efficient. Their efficiency rates are usually in the teens to 20% instead of 30 to 40%. They're just not as efficient. The renewable potential there is there. They're never ending. They're also what's called intermittent resources, which means that they're not always there. So like a wind energy is an intermittent resource because the wind is not necessarily always blowing or blowing hard enough to be able to produce wind energy. So because of this, renewable energies cannot be used for what is known as the base load of the energy grid. What this means is the base load is basically the backbone. It is whenever, it's when you need energy there, you need to have it there right there. So the backbone comes from more reliable technologies like coal, something that once it's turned on, you don't have to depend on anything else. It's going to be generating energy no matter what. And so that's one of the problems with renewables is they're intermittent resources. So they cannot be relied upon as baseload resources. There are some ways to combat this. Currently, there's people testing out ways to store wind energy for whenever it is needed. There's different ways that are being tested, some compressed air methods and other lithium-ion batteries. Neither of those have had enough breakthrough to be considered viable at this point. Renewable energies are also not as cost competitive as traditional generation resources. They're currently government subsidized. There's all kinds of tax incentives and tax rebates that try to keep renewable energy on a competitive price point with the rest of these technologies. The main one of these being the production tax credit. What the production tax credit does is it essentially, after tax rebates, allows utility companies to purchase power from wind energy power plants, at a competitive rate of 2.2 cents per kilowatt hour. If you remember, natural gas was right around 1 cent per kilowatt hour, so it puts it on a much more level playing field, whereas without this production tax credit, you would have to purchase these renewable energy at about 15 to 18 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a significant there's a significant gap there between the cost points of these traditional technologies and these renewable technologies. And that's one of the main inhibitors also. There's also all kinds of government regulations to go along with these tax credits. There's also all kinds of other benefits that the government provides to try and make these more competitive. You can go on and on, but I just want the main one to be known, and that is the production tax credit. It's the main thing keeping renewable energy in business, and it's not always there. There's been several times throughout the past, since its enactment in the 1990s, that the PTC has expired, and it's kind of left renewable energy in limbo for those times until Congress actually votes to approve it again or not. So without the PTC, renewable energy would not have near the share that it does today. So with that being said, after doing all this study, doing all these analysis, breaking down each one of these industries and energies and how they work together and alongside each other and how they compare to each other, that's what I'm trying to say. Excuse me. I feel like I I found that the best way to try and combat this energy crisis is not completely doing one or the other, eliminating the use of fossil fuels and completely going to renewable energy, or abandoning renewable energy and completely relying on the resources we have. The answer lies in the middle ground. I mean, it can't be any more clear. For those wanting to get rid of these fossil fueled resources, the fact of the matter is that we can't right now. It's not an option. We need these for our base load. We need these reliable resources that we know that we can produce cheaply, that are competitive, and we need to use these while we have them. We don't have these forever, so we need to use these to come up with our base load while we're perfecting these renewable energy techniques and innovating new renewable energy techniques. Because where renewable energy sits right now, it's not ready to be the main player in our energy industry. It's not competitive enough. It's not efficient enough. So it's got work to do. But the thing is it can get there. And all it takes is the best minds in the world continuing to try and improve, continuing to try and innovate. Innovation is what's going to bring us out of this crisis. And so the main thing that I took from this study was we need to be using our resources that we have right now and continuing to improve those to make them more efficient and make them less harmful to the environment, to capture more of these harmful emissions that they give off, and to make them more efficient. And we need to use these while we've got them, and to continue to grow the new and clean and renewable energy techniques that we're working on. Once we have a harmony between these, we'll see growth, and that is the foundation that needs to be laid for where we need to go in the future. I want to thank you for taking the time for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.